Hi there, my name's Jill Tiny. I'm from Collaboration Global, and this is our podcast, Being Human, Hidden Depths. I'm going to be interviewing some of our members from Collaboration Global, and they're going to be sharing with you their extraordinary lives. Although they would probably believe they're just normal, everyday, average humans, but they are extraordinary. A bit like you and me. We all have our story to tell. We've all been through difficult times, and we've come out the other end having learned an extraordinary amount about ourselves that we can share with others. So I think you'll find lots of things that will resonate with where you've been in your journey as well. I look forward to seeing you on the other side. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jill Tiny, and welcome to the Being Human, Hidden Depths podcast by Collaboration Global. It's been a bit chilly here in the good old UK, but I'm really excited to talk to somebody over the other side of the pond who's probably used to much worse weather than we are here in England, and one of our latest members at Collaboration Global. And I'm excited for this podcast because I don't know a huge amount about her, and I want to find out more about this amazing human being that has just entered our lovely community. So welcome, Michelle Howe. Lovely to have you with us.
Thank you, Jill. It's great to be here.
Lovely. Now, on your Zoom picture and on your LinkedIn and anywhere else we can find you, you're Michelle J. Howe. And one thing I've never actually said is, what's the J stand for?
I've questioned, why do I keep my J? Why do I keep my J? I'm like, it's just because people are like, if you're going to get introduced or if you're speaking, Michelle Howe, like, why are you putting the J in there, Michelle? Who's going to stop and say Michelle J? But I'm like, Josephine is my middle name.
Wow.
And Josephine came from my mother's side of the family. It's on my father's side of the family. I'm like, I am not getting rid of, even when I got married, I'm like, I am not getting rid of my middle name.
Of course not. No.
Because I love, it's just, when I think of the word, it's an old name, but when I think of it, I'm like, oh, no, it's me, Michelle J. Howe. And then I called my kids, all my kids have J's for first names.
Oh, that's nice.
Now, I didn't plan that, but they are. So I'm like, I must have an affinity to J. There's something about the J that is, and I do numerology, and I know a lot about a lot of different topics. And I know that your name, there's a certain numerology that goes with it. And when what you were born with, what you became, I'm like, nope, I need my J in there. It's just me.
Yeah, no, I love it. And you know what? When you go searching for you put the J in, then you know you've got the right person. There's a lot of Michelle Howes out there.
Yeah, there is.
Michelle Howe sounds like the beginning of a question. Yeah. Michelle J. Howe, it's like, that's it. That's who she is. Now I know Josephine. What a lovely name.
Thank you.
That's gorgeous. Okay, Michelle J. Howe, you are known for being the founder and creator of the empath evolution, or evolution, as we might say here in the UK. Empathy is a big deal in my book. People go around calling themselves an empath, and I didn't know what that meant. But I have lived my life feeling other people's pain, however it manifests. And for me, that means if I see somebody in pain, it makes my knees go funny. I really just, I feel that. I can't watch any movies or anything when the people are in pain, because I know it's pretend, but it still gets me. So I don't watch it. I don't want that angst and that upset inside. Where did your journey of being an empath or being empathetic or understanding the power of empathy, where did that come from?
That's a great question. My God, that's a really big question. Can I ask you this little question? Where did it begin? Well, okay. Empath, being empathic, people get bogged down with both of them. There is a difference between those two concepts and ideas, but for the most part, I don't like to divide up, spit out these concepts. You belong in the club. You don't belong in the club. So, I've so to me, being empathic is about sensing and feeling and looking at people, not so much surface level, but really noticing things that are there.
Mm.
And although everybody can sense and feel, we all sense and feel a bit differently than
Mm.
one another. We all see things a little bit differently, which
Sure.
isn't necessarily about being an empath or not, but it's how do I manage through life? How do I relate to life? And there's so many different like tools out there, Myers-Briggs, the DISC system that it tells you about your personality, how you function, right?
Hmm.
And empathy is one of the characteristics, character traits, empathy, right? Is it a leadership skill? Is it not a leadership skill? Well, to me, being an empath is a way of being in the world. It's really when I discovered I was an empath, which did not happen till age 40,
Okay, a couple of years ago then.
I didn't know there was a word. I've always functioned as an empath, but I didn't know that
Yeah.
was a thing. I didn't know that it was different.
Mm.
I didn't know, I didn't know until I really was struggling and I really went looking for some answer to something. Why am I struggling so much? Why did I feel so much? Why am I going through this massive, um, I went through like a dark night of the soul, massive spiritual awakening,
Right.
and I hadn't recognized it. I didn't know such a thing existed. But when I found 30 traits of an empath, I'm like, oh shit.
Tick, tick, tick.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I have most of these traits, or I've had them, or I relate with them, and my knowing, because
Mm.
a person who is an empath they have a strong intuitive hit. They know things that others
Mm.
do not read or notice or appreciate. The energy goes up in the room, the energy goes down in a room. Someone's upset. Like
Yeah.
I was involved in different women's organizations, and once I'd go to these meetings, immediately beehive, this person needs me.
Yeah.
I don't know why they need me, but my attention goes to her.
Wow.
Immediately, my husband would say to me, before he knew any of this, there is something absolutely wrong with you, Michelle. Why
Oh
do you go
no.
to all these events? Why do you go to events and strangers, people you don't even know, they tell you their stories. They don't
Yeah.
tell you a little story.
Yeah, it's
They
a big
tell
thing.
you the deepest, darkest story of their
Mm.
life.
Amazing. Yeah.
And he would look at me and I'd be like, well, I don't know. I'm like,
Doesn't that happen to you, darling? And he's like, no.
no, my husband, and mind you, I think my husband's quite sensitive and respectful of people and
Yeah.
leans in, but he has such a logical side to him.
Hmm.
He doesn't want to hear what their stories are. He doesn't ask them what they are. Like I have a very open stance. So if you ask me who an
Hmm.
empath is a person that has the capacity to feel and sense. They're very open people. They can uplift, they can transmute negativity. They're the person you call on the phone when you don't feel good, and they
Hmm.
help lift you up.
Yeah. And we all need one of those, don't we? Even an empath needs somebody they can go to that's like that.
Oh, absolutely. And I can tell you, I mean, I didn't know the word empath, but when I ran into different challenges in my life, I would get on the phone, you know, only once.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm never calling her again.
Oh. Oh dear.
Because she did not uplift, she didn't have the capacity
Yeah.
to help me, hold me, shift, transmute. She didn't have it. Some
Mm.
people have it in spades. Some
Hmm.
people, I felt worse when I got off the phone,
Mm.
right? So everybody needs a friend who is an empath.
Yeah, for
There
sure.
are a lot of empaths in the world that do not realize they're empathic.
Yeah.
I didn't know for 40 years. I
Yeah.
just knew things, and I was like, in high school, I'd come home and eat. I had to eat to feel better. I didn't know why I had to eat.
Oh.
But I'm
Interesting.
like, I just do not feel good. I'm like, something is wrong. So I'm eating and okay, I feel better now.
Yeah.
Or, I didn't want to go certain places. I didn't know why I didn't want to go certain places. Nope. I might have had plans, but nope, that's not happening. I don't feel it. It's not happening. I'm stubborn enough that I actually listen. Some people don't listen to their intuition and override it,
Yeah.
right? But I listened, and then again, all my friends would I would be friends with the people who needed help. And
Sounds familiar.
I didn't mind it, but at the end of the day, like my brother's like, "What's going on with all your friends, Michelle?" Like
Yeah.
they are the people that needed me, and
Mm,
I was their friend.
mm,
So a lot of empaths do struggle. I would have to write at night. I figured out that journaling and writing helped me feel better,
yeah.
just to kind of clear myself. I after the fact, I'm like, oh my God, when I was young, every New Year's Eve, I was a basket case of crime.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, why? I'm like, oh, the emotional energies on the planet are really high
Yeah.
that night.
Right.
And I'm open enough or fluid enough that I'm tapping into what's going on around me.
Hmm.
And it's not necessarily my pain or my feelings, but these are some of the skills that when you really are an empath, you need to learn.
Mm,
A lot of them are energetic. They're just teaching you how to use your senses and use information in ways that are more positive to you because you really do function differently than other people. You
it's
function.
interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you can look at the world that we're in now is much more open about how our brains work and how our mental health is and the universe and the energy that's out into the world and the fact that we are all energetic beings. And of course, there are people there's these labels that we all love to give people, don't we? All these little labels. And on the autistic spectrum, you can see how, and having been a teacher many years ago and worked with young children, mostly the boys, is that when a child is on that autistic spectrum, it's very hard for them to connect with you because they don't like the eye contact, they don't like any touch of any sort. And there's no kind of empathy from them. It's like it doesn't exist. They can lash out at another child and have no recourse if they've hurt another child, or there's no remorse
Right.
shown because they just can't see it. And if you imagine, as I believe, that we're all kind of on a level of a spectrum, empath is kind of at one end. And maybe autism is at the other end. I don't know. This is not scientific, folks. This is just me thinking out loud. Um, and it's interesting how the people at one end can actually connect up and help the people at the other end, and obviously all those in the middle as well. And it's not aren't they lovely, aren't they clever, they're an empath. It's just that's the way, the gift that you've been given, and we've all got different gifts. And sometimes an autistic person has got amazing gifts and they call it their superpower because of how they see the world and how they operate and how they can look at technology or other things in a way that an empath would be like totally lost. It's the gift that we're given throughout the world. So if you waited until your 40s, until you kind of worked out, did the research and found out that you were an empath, did that have an impact on your life? Or did you just go, oh, okay, that's why I cry on New Year's Eve? Was it kind of like a revolutionary, oh yeah, I get it
Um,
now. I get who I am. Or was it something that like, oh, now what am I going to do with this?
it lit me up. It lit me up because I am a curious person to begin with.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my dear Lord, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for what is this about? I mean, I had one woman say, you have so much healing potential, so much light. Stop hiding your light behind the bushel.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, are you talking about? But it lit me up and it threw me into this stage of my development where a lot of things became about spiritual knowledge. A
Hmm.
lot of things became about energy and healing and depth and who am I? Like I really went in and I kind of secluded or separated or stepped back from, I was very much about family and my kids and this game and that game and work. All of a sudden, my interest kind of shifted.
Mm.
I shifted. And my husband's like, "What's going on with you?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, you married a CPA accountant, but guess what? I care more about who people are than their businesses,
Yeah. Yeah.
who they are, where they're going, what they're becoming. And that's my role in the world. And that's what I'm here to do. So deal with it."
So you saw it as like fait accompli. It's like now I know this, then I have to go down that road. It wasn't like I'll hold this to myself and keep it to myself and not bother anybody with it. It was like it's got to come out
Well,
and
I felt, empaths do this, the responsibility and the obligation and the passion
mm,
behind what it was that I went through and how I see a lot of people struggling in the world and a lot of people unbeknownst to them
yeah.
what the struggle is about. Truly, I felt like I could be a huge asset in helping them uncover beneath, there's a lot of theories and personality assessments and blah, blah, blah. People are teaching and
Hmm.
telling you how to behave, but innately there's a huge knowing and a huge feeling component to life that can guide you
Mm,
in the direction that you need to go to be more in line with your spiritual purpose, your actual authentic self.
mm.
Not because you're trying to fit into some box, because you're not in the box. You're outside the box.
There's no box.
There is no box.
Yeah.
So that was like the passion behind Path Evolution. It's just, you know, seeing it and then creating it. Creating is a
Mm,
lot harder than seeing it. Creating it is a little bit more methodical because there's all these um, things progress very slow when you're trying to really try to dot your I's, cross your T's, and do this and do
yeah.
that. But on a spiritual level, the things I know spiritually, energetically, we are so powerful.
Mm,
And there's so much that happens when we come together. And I'm like, I, the brand of Empath Evolution, the brand of Michelle, like I want to help at the higher level, bring the people who are ready to hear this message
mm.
forward more.
So you've obviously got a message to share.
Yeah.
And when you first started out and you're sort of sitting on your own going, I think I'm going to start a business and I think it's going to be about this and I'm going to get my brand and this is how it's going to work. And were you in a community, relationships with people whereby you could announce this and they go, woohoo? Or were you in a space where people go, okay, that sounds a bit woo woo? Were they in that place, or did you feel nervous coming out with this idea that,
So,
in the business world, some people might go, okay, bit of a crackpot, maybe, I don't know. I mean, in my world, we'd be all like, woohoo, brilliant, rock on. But there are some places where you go like, okay, you go and talk to those people over there because this is the business lot over here. And I've been in those rooms as well when I've been looked at as a crackpot too. How did it go for
really?
you when you first came out, as it were?
So when I first started, I'm a little bit of a shapeshifter. Like I change how I present things depending on who I'm in front of,
Yeah.
right? So in order for them to get the message of what I'm saying, I changed. And sometimes this hasn't really always felt like this is not such a great quality. But then other times I'm like, oh, it needed that in order for it to land where it needed to
Yeah.
land.
How can they hear it if they're not here, if it's not being delivered in a language
It
that they understand?
when I first started Empath Evolution, I can remember being very open and frank with some of the women that I thought could hear it, and even they could not hear it.
Wow.
They could not appreciate it. So it didn't land, it didn't have anything to, until somebody goes through an awakening experience, until they decide that there's something that they're missing.
Hmm.
They don't, yeah, that's kind of cute. That's kind of interesting. Yeah. but it doesn't stick to anything. It doesn't have any relevance to them until they're ready to really hear more.
Mm.
So I would say in the very beginning, it's not that I was shy about saying it. I just was looking for the way that they could hear me. And for the most part, they really couldn't. So I kept a lot of things to myself. And even my husband, he could not wrap his head around what I was doing.
Wow.
And he was, I want to say almost, I don't want to say embarrassed, but he couldn't put words to it.
Yeah.
And it didn't really become more acceptable until the last maybe 5 years. Like I've had to like coax him and give him, talk on his terms he could hear me at. He goes, I really would like you to stop using the word energy. It's just so weird, Michelle. It's just, I'm like, oh my God. He goes, you cannot bring that word into the corporate. They will listen to you. And I'm like, things have really turned around a lot.
Mm. Mm.
And, it's taken those individual people at those levels, yes, you're not going to be appreciated. You can't really talk your language. But what I found is you don't have to talk your language. You just have to be what that is. And you do what you do. They don't have to accept you. They don't have to understand. You have to understand yourself.
Mm.
Of course, it's nice to be around people that you can talk frankly with and you can relate with, and you're there to support one another.
Mm.
You're relating well. But in most environments, people understand or can, like, you meet them where they are
Mm. Yeah.
and you can help them, but you can't help them if your language, if they can't relate to you. They can't absorb it unless they can. So you just be, so being you be all of who you are, and that in a sense does 90% of the work,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is sub-level to their consciousness. They're being shifted. They're you're doing your work just by being who you are.
Mm.
And then if they want to know more, or if you can add a phrase or two or some advice more, that's, the cherry on the top.
It's a bit like when people go through, as an example, a grief. If you've gone through a bereavement, somebody can tell you what it's going to be like, but you won't understand it until you've gone through it for yourself. And then you can, having gone through that experience, you know the highs and the lows and everything in between, but you still can't explain it effectively to somebody else because they have to go through it. And I think that's what you're saying, is when somebody is there holding your hand through the understanding and the learning of getting your head around how being an empath is a powerful thing. It's a bit like Brené Brown with her shame and guilt and all the things that she talks about, and vulnerability, and the courage to be vulnerable. Until somebody kind of guides you in that way, that you think you block it off, and you don't know about it, so you don't explore it. You just go, oh no, I'm not an empath, or oh, it's not for me. Oh, it's that energy talk. I'm not. Yeah, I get it. But so when you're kind of pushing it away, you're not allowing yourself to get it. And until someone can sit by your side and be with you, as I say, through a bereavement, then you get what it feels like, and it's okay, and it's okay to feel those feels, and then you move through into another space. It's the same as personal development. You can read all the books in the world to say, when you understand your limiting beliefs, and when you understand the mindset of this A, B, or C, and you can go nod, and intellectually you get it, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically, no, not at all. Until you've walked into that space and explored with another human being that can take you by the hand, not literally necessarily, but sometimes, and walk you through it. I went through a learning space around a relationship I had when I was a child. I was bullied as a child, and it wasn't until I went through a physicality process of forgiving myself and forgiving this other person, that I was able to let it go, let it go. But I knew logically about it. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I'm done. It's good. It's fine. It's over. But it wasn't until I went through the physical process that took about a 2 hour process, which actually then happened again 6 months later and happened again 6 months later, for it to kind of the layers of an onion to be peeled away. So you can go, I have
Oh
let it
yeah.
go. I
It's
have let.
very, it's very humbling to be in that zone and aware that there's some spiritual, emotional healing underway,
Mm.
and that you just, you're growing, you're shifting, you're changing, you've accepted it, but it's not like, oh yeah, check, done.
Yeah.
It's not like we're done. It just, but on some level, you're ready. You were ready to look at it. Like some people
Yeah.
do not care to self-reflect, do not care to forgive. They
Mm.
like holding on to certain identity. It's not their time,
Yes. Yeah.
not for them. So yeah,
It's hard, isn't it? So, obviously, you've had various clients and you've helped them through various elements of their life with
yep.
no names, no pack drill. Have you got any stories of anything beautiful that?
Oh, I do have some beautiful stories. Yeah. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about George. George is a huge client of mine. We're still connected, very connected. George had gone through a horrible, well, challenging, let's put challenging, traumatic childhood.
Mm,
And he had survived lots of things. And he had become always very empathic, always very sensitive. But people feared George because if you got in the way of his family,
oh,
George had no fear other than his own father. I
oh,
have no fear. The emotions that George experienced were pretty intense when he experienced them.
mm,
And he had to like build certain walls to survive certain things that happened to him.
mm,
And the good news is he got through cancer when he was 25. He got through divorce. He got through his grandmother dying, really in a really bad way. And then his wife, the love of his life, he loved. And thankfully, he found his soulmate. He married her, and she died in the middle of the night.
oh my goodness.
So you wake up to that. He was 57 years old. Wake up to that one morning,
Mm,
and it's completely, what do you do when the love of your life dies?
mm.
You cry. You cry. He was a puddle of tears and whatnot. Now
Yeah.
he was on my list as a subscriber and he was getting information. But at one point I'm like, I need to know from all you people where you're from, and if you ever want to talk to me, here's my link. And this was probably 3, 4 months after his wife had passed away, reached out to me.
Mm,
And we got on the phone and immediately he's not a guy he can spot bullshit a mile away. Like he's the kind of guy nobody would ever say was sensitive because he was a man's man. Let's put it
right.
that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Michelle, I'm very lucky that I am not in jail because with the things where I was around and the intensity of emotions around some of these things, I'm lucky that it didn't go that far. I had someone watching my back.
Mm.
So we started working together, and at one point I said to him, he goes, I think you're kind of nuts. I go, you are like his hands were heating up. I was working on him energetically. And then there's some teachings. I like to bring people through storylines and shifting things. It's all energy work. I'm working behind the scenes, dissipating the charges, clearing the storylines, just helping you come back together. And he goes, I don't know what's happening, but I'm starting to believe you. He goes, and I don't believe most people, like, but he knew immediately. It's almost like I was giving him oxygen to breathe.
Yeah.
He was finally making sense of who he was, and he could connect with spirit, connect with his wife.
Oh,
He could connect with his ancestors. His hands are active and moving. He's like, I'm like, well, George is like completely shifted and found a new purpose in his life.
gosh.
I mean, the answer for, I mean, his is probably the highest version of a role probably that I've had to date is to be there and beside him and watch this unfold for him.
Mm.
So, that's George. Some other people, again, I think natural empaths, but your childhood has so much to do, and you can hold on to some things, and they're fears that hold you back as an
Mm.
adult. Um, Allie really didn't know about being married, getting married. Like she had so much hesitations about this topic, and she had so much residue, like toxic um, grief and shame, and like just things from her family carried forward that I did some work on her energetically. Before you know it, she's lost a ton of weight. She's getting engaged. She's married. She's doing
Oh,
plays. Like the things that were holding her back, and she's learned how to manage her mind, her beliefs, her fears in a way that support her making like, and she was already empathic. She was
mm.
already feeling and sensing, but it was putting that in perspective with living a normal life,
Yeah.
right? How you don't, so it's all energetic. I guess that's my biggest thing. Like,
Yeah. Which is, I mean, whether you believe it or not, it's a bit, I've used this example a lot. You know, when you plug in the plug to light your lamp and you flick the switch, you expect the electricity to come on because that's what happens. But in our world, we don't think about the energy that we're emanating or receiving. And people go, oh, I don't really understand how it all works. Well, I don't understand really. I mean, I know the basics of electricity, getting from A to B, but it's still quite a miracle when that light goes on. But we just take it for granted. It's the done thing. If we were brought up with this understanding of empathy and understanding of the energy that flows, where you can walk in a room and you can just feel it, you can taste it, you can touch it
yeah,
when it's a serious energy or a joyful energy, when somebody's just sitting there but they're just so happy inside, you can just feel it off of them. It's
yeah,
this, literally you can feel the buzz. If we were all taught about and it was as natural as turning on a light bulb, the
yeah,
world you can imagine would be a different place, because people wouldn't be quite so quick, I don't think, to criticize, because they would understand the impact they have from a look, from a glance, or a word that they said that actually hit the wrong nerve. And then when we understand ourselves better, we understand how to unpack the stuff that's happened to us in our past, but also historically, generationally, the impacts from our parents' lives and our grandparents' lives and our ancestors' lives. It depends how far you want to go back. I've only recently discovered that my grandmother had a huge impact in how I behaved as a child and as an adult, because that was the history, the family story that we'd been brought through the
yeah,
ages,
yeah,
because of what she'd lived through, the trauma, the massive trauma that she had lived through. We were still, I wouldn't say suffering from, because it stood me in good stead, to be honest with you. It got me, it was resilience. I was resilient because she had been resilient going through her trauma. But at the same time, all the other stuff stopped me from being who I was and finding out who I was. So what you're doing, what I absolutely love about this, Michelle, is that you are normalizing what is a normal thing for most people, where most people want to just use logic and stick to this one road that they know. And it's A plus B equals C, 2 plus 2 equals 4. And you're going, well, maybe it doesn't, because if we open this door and there's all this other stuff going on, it's a
yeah,
whole new world that most people don't even dare to take a step into that room to see what's going on there. And actually, And again, I use this example a lot. When you buy a washing machine, bear with, all right, there's a message. When you buy a washing machine, generally, you want to get the fancy one that does the all singing, all dancing, makes you a cup of tea and does everything else. But in reality, you use that program and you use that program, one for your whites and one for your colors. But it does so much more. You can have it, you can set it for this and you can schedule it for that, and it can do these colors and it can do woolens and it can do everything else. But no, it's all right. I'll use that one and I'll use that one. That's what we're like in our bodies. We're only using like 20% of what's possible. And you are opening that door to the 80% that we don't ever utilize and consider. So I think what you're doing is a powerful thing. And having these stories of how these strong men have kind of come into realization that, yeah, because of you, I'm now a different person. And it can be a good different person. You're not going to be going backwards. It can only be moving you forwards.
He's moving. Oh no, he's absolutely. He said, we just met the other day. We were talking about he was born with a lot of rage in him. His
Oh,
father had the rage, his grandfather had the rage.
interesting.
And what do you do when you don't even know where it's coming from? It's just there.
Mm,
So someone just flicked the light on and it's there again. Like, so we had to work with that anger, rage quite a bit.
mm-hmm,
And it's morphed throughout the time. But
mm,
it could burn things down, really, along the way. It did burn things down. It's just a matter of just thinking a little bit bigger than
mm,
just this present moment and being real with yourself. I
mm,
mean, one guy I talked to last week, old. He's not old. He's probably in his early 60s, but he's a former vet,
mm,
warrior, calls himself, very spiritual now. 88, like he's educated himself about so many things, but he always had the empathy
mm,
there. He just didn't know. And here are these, he goes, wow, he goes, so, someone going from surviving, when you're just surviving, you're just basically doing what you need to do to get by, to
mm,
all of a sudden you have the bandwidth to really take a closer look and focus and thrive and enjoy instead of, push, 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 push.
mm.
Like, because that's, not nonsensical in a sense that you're just going about your life and before you know it, it's done. Like you're empty. There's nothing there. There's nothing revitalizing you. And like George had walls built all around him to protect him.
Yeah,
But those walls, as much as their protection, they can also keep away
it's a good,
what is feeding you or could feed you.
yeah, yeah.
So it's him finding a safe enough space where he allowed that to happen.
Mm,
And like what I have seen too is, and George has worked with this, which is so cool. It's so cool when you hear about where he's able to connect and what he's able to do spiritually, which helps people on a very concrete level live their lives. Because when you feel like there's missing parts of you,
yeah.
they are shut off. They're missing, they're not there. There's empty spots in you because along the way you've had trauma
Mm,
that's been left to just sit there or left alone. The emotions weren't processed. The scenario wasn't validated. There's shame around it. It's like,
mm.
and people become suicidal, people become depressed. Like you've allowed your light, you've allowed the outside to suppress so much of who you are that you don't even recognize who you are anymore. If life is not really an enjoyable scene unless you're feeling those endorphins that make you happy about yourself, your life, your light. Like you need the light on.
Yeah.
Light off doesn't work for very long or
Yeah.
very well for you. So, like we're
Yeah.
helping one person that we know. He's a young kid. He's going through a really tough time, but it's from trauma from when he was young.
Mm-hmm.
And those hidden small parts of him, that young 6-year-old child needs a little help. So spiritually speaking, you're working on that to help integrate it back in to who he is. Like it
Mm.
takes a lot of courage to go back and to look and
Mm.
to be with that. So
And the thing is, if you don't go back and look and you leave it there and you lock it in a box and go, that's fine, I can ignore it, that's okay. It's still there and it's still kind of festering away. And that festering, not only does it block away because you're making this decision, this cutting off decision,
yeah,
you're also cutting off other emotions in your body because you're not dealing with the emotions because they're too scary. And I get that, it is really scary.
right.
You're cutting off joy. You're
It's the
cutting off
flow. It's the
all
flow of the energy
exactly.
throughout
And then what
your
happens to that festering? It turns in on you. And then before you know it, you're ill. You've got this disease, you've got that disease, and there's other things
absolutely.
going
Yep.
on. And it just
The
perpetuates.
snowball effect. The
Mm,
snowball effect. We actually had a scenario in our house. It's forced me out of my office and into a bedroom here. So I've got that the digital background going.
mm,
But it doesn't take much when you look at like dreams and symbolism, houses, first floor, second floor, basement.
yeah.
Subconscious is the basement.
Yeah.
Conscious is the first floor. Your higher self is the second floor of the attic, right? So we found water damage, water, some mold going on in our basement. I'm like looking, I'm like, my office is in the basement. I'm like,
Mm,
basement. You leave it, all it takes is a little damage. You don't fix it up. Next thing you know, you got a bigger problem and you don't even notice the problem there until it shows itself.
yeah.
Forget me. You didn't remember 5 years ago, you didn't leave the humidifier on for 4 months and the dehumidifier. And this is what happens. And I'm like, and it grows. It almost like that top, it can grow
Mm,
to infect other things because there's no air circulation. Like this is all symbolism for
yeah.
me. I was like, my husband looked at me. He goes, okay, you've got me, Michelle. We're getting rid of things in the bay. I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord. Like, let's just ship this stuff out,
Free the
clean
energy up.
things up
Mm,
as much as possible so that, and you keep your eye on it. Like, I called around my friend who's a realtor. I'm like, what do I, she goes, it's the basement.
yeah.
There is things that can accumulate there. Like there is water that can come in. You have to keep your eye on it. Like you just have to do your due diligence. And it's like your vessel, your body. Like it's serving you physically, right? But there's a whole mental, emotional, spiritual, like how you feeling? Like and trying to balance out the anxiety, the turmoil, the stress, the all these other things we're expecting or thinking that our bodies are capable of handling. Well,
Mm,
maybe you are, but what's happening 10 years from now that you didn't
mm,
like, how do you make sure this vessel is running like top notch? It's
yeah.
running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, if the vessel is running at high capacity, you've got space for other people to support them, haven't you? So
Yes.
when you've looked after yourself, then it's your turn to look after somebody else and take it on from there. Michelle, talking about people having traumas from their childhood, one of the questions I love asking people is when you were young, do you have a happy memory that you can recall for us when you were like 7 or 8? Um, was there a happy moment in your life? Just a one-off memory that you might go, oh yeah, I remember that. It was a really good day.
Always lots of happy memories. At one point when I was going through my awakening, I used to write about my childhood. I think I was asked to write about my childhood, and I only outlined all the happy moments, and I shared it with someone, and he said to me, "This doesn't quite seem right, Michelle, because I'm only really remembering the happy things." I'm like, "Oh, that's really interesting." I'm like, there had to be some things that weren't, and I'm sure I tried to not remember them if they
Yeah.
were. Yeah. But 7 or 8, gosh, at 7 or 8, I was in Italy. I lived in Italy for 5 years in Sicily. My
Oh,
my my
wow.
parents both my parents are from there. They were both born there, but my father's family was there and one had died. And so my grandfather was there. So we went out there to straighten out things and turned out from a
Mhm.
year, I was there for 5 years.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
became very Italian at age 5. And I think a happy, fun moment is it's a really fun moment. So we used to walk to school every day, me and my brother's 2 years younger than me. And I was a little bit I like to tease people, especially my brother. I was like incessantly like
Oh.
he was always like what would I say? My brother could do nothing wrong. He was always very loved and he got attention for no reason. I was always like the oldest and the smartest and the this and the that. So here we are, walking to get home, and we would go around the corner and I would yell for my mother to open the door.
Hmm.
And she would like hit the bell and the door would open for us to go home. And it was so rotten of me. So I would say, Mom, abre la porta. Like, and she would open the door, click the door open, and I would run to the door and I would shut the door on my brother.
Oh, but he loved you.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think of it now and it makes me laugh. And back then, my mother's like, why do you do that to your brother? I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of funny, Mom. So that's one of the things. Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's funny. I wonder what he would make of that now. Does he still remember it, or have you not had that conversation?
Um, I'm sure he would say, well, mind you, he's a laid back kind of guy. He would just say, you were just not very nice. I just have like this humor. Like I would just laugh. The funniest thing. But anyway, that is he doesn't hold it against me.
Oh,
It didn't
good. I'm
it
glad
didn't
to hear it.
really hurt him. Right.
Not that you know if he does. He might secretly, you don't know. I suggest next time you talk to him, is just say, Jill told me I need to say sorry for that. Apologize from your heart, you mean little girl.
Well, it's funny because, as I really, this is going to sound kind of bad, but I really think girls, their brains, I think we could be much more malicious.
Oh, yeah.
Boys, it was like, just this nice little boy.
Bless him.
Like,
Oh, bless
you
him.
don't get to get all the attention all the time.
Yeah, he was a golden boy and you were jealous.
I was at that moment, right?
Yeah.
But it's um it it's just it's a kid thing. It's a sibling thing. I don't know any siblings who didn't, let that. I have 3 kids and they all had their own thing that they did. And I'm like, interesting.
It is, isn't it? How people operate at that time. Yeah. And what people remember in the future. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yes, absolutely. 3 kids. I came from we're three. Each
Mm.
of us remembers things completely our own way.
Yes, yes. It's like the other people weren't even there at the time. And it's like, don't you remember that? No, it's not what I remember. And they've got a different story of the same thing. Yeah, for sure. Interesting. Before you go, I'm just looking at the time now. You've come into Collaboration Global. I can't even remember how we met, but God bless LinkedIn. It's done its job, and you're in the right community, and we're having a fabulous time with what you're teaching us. What was it about the idea of Collaboration Global that sparked your interest? What made you join?
I believe, oh gosh, what was his name? There was a man that I was networking with, and he sent over a bunch of different networks that he participates in, and Grand Connection was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went in, I always follow my feeling. I trust my feeling, and I actually came in late because I had a client session before the meeting, and that was a guest meeting that you were having, and you're like, "Hey, Michelle, they're all in their small circle, so you're okay here." And I'm like, "All right, not a big deal." So I went to that, and then I went to another one, and I noticed you were doing the mental health summit,
Mm,
um, and I'm like, they're not decisions. When I need to do something,
that's a really
if
good.
I have to think about it, it's actually a no.
Yeah.
It's just an actual, nope, we're doing this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm right there. So it wasn't, I felt like the people in it were thinking bigger,
Mm-hmm.
and that's who I am for all intents and purposes. And I wanted to be affiliated with that
Yeah.
and support that mission. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really interesting. But you're right. They are up to something good, and they are thinking in a bigger way. And you've just given me a top tip there. Is if you want to do it, it's the feeling that makes the decision for you. So you don't even have to choose. If it feels right, then it's the thing to do. So we're so happy that you're in the community. There are so many people that you have yet to connect with that are going to be enamored with what you're doing, and it's going to support and help so many people, not only in the community, but it's our job to make sure more and more people know about you so that you can help more and more people as time goes on. So thank you so much for your time and your insight and the way you look at the world, and the way empathy that's been part of you forever has only now become part of your purpose and your mission. And I can see it going in a great direction. So Michelle, thank you so much. If somebody wanted to contact you, what's the best way for them to get hold of you?
I would say email me, Michelle@empathevolution.com. You could also check out my website, empathevolution.com. And, there's a quiz on there. There's a subscriber button on there. There's all kinds of nice things you can get involved with. I share a lot of content with my community, so they grow from that. But I'm also looking to grow the message and to speak different places and be interviewed.
Yes.
So
Indeed. And obviously, if you want to meet Michelle online, she comes along to our Collaboration Global sessions as well. So if you come along to a guest session, and you can find that at collaborationglobal.org, or go to Eventbrite and search for Collaboration Global, and you can grab yourself a seat there and meet her there. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much. I've had a thoroughly nice conversation. Cannot wait to do it again very soon. Thank you, Michelle.
you're welcome. Have a nice day,
Take care.
everyone.